Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, a look into the troubled floating pier off the coast of Gaza. We dig into what went wrong with the effort. Also, Project 2025, a Republican roadmap for a second Trump presidency, has gained a lot of attention recently. But how would it impact troops and veterans? We take a look. Plus, headlines from around the military. We get a report from a major air show in England and check in with the service branches on the latest. Also, free screenings of Deadpool and Wolverine. Some deployed troops are set to get a first look at the movie. And more stories of grit and tenacity from the 2024 Warrior Games. We talk to an athlete about the life-saving benefits of participation in adaptive sports. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Diana Stancy. In the late spring of this year, as the war in Gaza rolled on, the U.S. launched an ambitious plan to provide aid to civilians in the war zone. They would use a massive floating pier to get aid to those in need. Known as Joint Logistics Over the Shore, or JLOTS, the pier capability was beset by rough seas in the Mediterranean and hindered by continuing chaos in Gaza, which prevented the safe delivery of aid. Finally, after tens of millions of dollars in costs and just 20 days of operations, the Joint Army-Navy project was shuttered by the Pentagon. While military leaders called it a success, outside analysts have characterized the effort as one hampered by uncontrollable limitations. For a deeper look into the Gaza Pier effort and the future of JLOTS capability, I talked with reporter Noah Robertson recently. Here's some of our conversation. Well, thank you so much for being here, Noah. First, I just wanted to get a little bit of a better sense of why did the U.S. build this pier off of Gaza, and tell us a little bit about how it functioned.
Well, happy to be here. Thank you for doing this. I think the story of the Gaza Pier really starts around March, but even before then. President Biden gave a State of the Union earlier this year in which he faced immense political pressure to do something about the plight of the Palestinian people. The UN World Food Program has been tracking the food scarcity that's present within the Strip amid Israel's war to try to root out Hamas after the attack last October, and many of them, almost all, 96%, are facing acute food insecurity around that time. So the president was facing pressure domestically to try to do something to try to relieve that pain, and came up with a mission to establish the military's own humanitarian corridor. They would do this not by getting food in through the land or air domains, which they had been doing since the beginning of the war, but rather through their own pier that they constructed off the 25-mile coast on Gaza. They would do this by creating a system called Joint Logistics Over the Shore, or JLOTS as it's also known. And then in 2 months, the military would have to build this and then establish its own maritime corridor to try to deliver aid into the Strip. They were able to succeed in this and then finish and establish the pier on the shore by around mid-May.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about why this effort has received so much criticism, especially recently?
I think the big criticism comes from two places. First, those who are supportive of the mission to have the military go in and establish this humanitarian corridor, but don't feel like it's gone to plan. I think the second bit would be people who don't feel like the military should be involved in this mission to start out with.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more details about why this is being dismantled and any future plans that we can expect to see with this?
I think the answer from the military's perspective would be that the mission was accomplished, and Central Command went out and briefed at the end of the Gaza Pier's mission to say that there was a mission complete status for it, that it was no longer needed. Their evidence for that, in part, was the 20 million pounds or so of aid that was able to get in. They cited this as the most efficient and also the safest route for aid to Gaza to the point in the war. The military isn't being specific about how long it will take for it to be dismantled, but suffice it to say that the pier's operation is over. They do plan to redeploy the assets at some point, though they haven't exactly said where, and the total cost is coming in under budget, they say, but they also haven't been specific about the number, except to say that it will be less than the $230 million that they quoted.
Thanks, Noah. To get another perspective on the Gaza Pier mission, Military Times managing editor Jeff Zuzulowicz recently spoke to a veteran with experience with JLOT's capability. Have a look.
We're joined now by Keith Robbins. He's a retired Army lieutenant colonel who has a lot of experience with the Joint Logistics Over the Shore, or JLOT's, capability that was used for the Gaza aid pier. Before his retirement in 2007, Robbins was the JLOT's program manager for U.S. Transportation Command. Keith, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
So I spoke to you and some other retired officers before the aid pier was stabbed into the Gaza beach there. A lot of folks shared some concerns about the security of the U.S. service members doing the mission, the assorted, 1,000 soldiers and sailors. Thankfully, a lot of those concerns never manifested into anything severe during the mission. But in general, looking back at the aid pier mission and this deployment of JLOTs, as an officer whose life, at least at the end of his tour, was really dedicated to the capability, what are your main takeaways from the pier mission in Gaza?
I think two things. One, on the decision to implement that capability. As you may recall, when we talked before, I had a lot of reservations about the capability of it based on the conditions. The weather conditions, the coastal conditions, and that sort of thing, the sea state, that mainly, because the capability in the Army system is not meant to be handled in higher sea states like Sea State 3 and above, much like the conditions that they were going to experience in Gaza. The mission itself, I thought, was a great application for that capability. You need to get large volumes of supplies, goods over the shore to folks that needed the shore, and you don't have a port or any other capability to do it. JLOTS is the perfect capability to handle that. But it has to be put in the right place in order for it to be successful. And then that's what we saw come out of this. It got over there, they put it up, and they got it going. But as soon as the weather changed and got more severe and those sea state conditions rose, they started to have issues. And that was not to be unexpected. So I think in reality, in the end, it did what it was supposed to do. It may not have met success to the level of expectations of those in senior leadership, but I'm sure it met, from what I saw, it met success and above expectation given the conditions that they were operating under.
When we return, a look into the military and veterans provisions of the polarizing conservative initiative, Project 2025. Don't go away. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. Project 2025, an in-depth political playbook organized by a conservative think tank as a possible roadmap for action in the next Republican presidency, has seen a lot of national attention recently. Democrats have repeatedly surfaced the group's roughly 900-page guidebook as a warning of things to come, highlighting its conservative stances on social issues and the structure of the federal government. But also included within the framework are plans for reshaping the military and veterans care. How would Project 2025 affect troops and vets if it were enacted after the next presidential election? Reporter Jonathan Lehrfeld took a look.
If you've not heard of Project 2025, it's a political playbook for what the next Republican administration could look like. If implemented, it would make sizable changes to the lives of service members and veterans. So what exactly is the initiative, and what impact could it have on troops and vets? Project 2025 includes a roughly 900-page policy agenda, a personnel database for those who could serve in the next conservative administration, a training for those individuals, and also plans for a playbook of actions to be taken in the first 180 days of office. Policy proposals in the plan include reducing the number of generals, banning transgender troops from service, and revoking the VA's ability to provide abortion-related care. The project was organized by the conservative think tank the Heritage Foundation, and the policy guidebook was authored by many officials who served in former President Donald Trump's administration. But while Trump has distanced himself from the Project 2025, Democrats have worked to tie him to it and have called the agenda a, quote, dangerous blueprint for what his second term could look like. In a chapter on the policy plan for the Department of Defense, a former acting Secretary of Defense under Trump suggested a series of policy changes that fall in line with conservative culture war arguments. That included reinstating service members to active duty who were separated for not receiving the COVID-19 vaccine, abolishing diversity, equity, inclusion offices and staffs, and reversing a policy that lets DoD cover travel costs for troops seeking reproductive care, including abortion services. Other propositions in the plan involved less partisan arguments, including reforms to the military's recruiting efforts, shipbuilding plans, and improvements to base housing. Separately, in a chapter dedicated to revisions to the Department of Homeland Security, it suggested that the Coast Guard, which currently operates under DHS during peacetime, be transferred out to the Justice or Defense Department. The policy chapter on reforming Department of Veterans Affairs involves rescinding VA's ability to provide abortion services and revising hybrid and remote work options for the department's employees. It was written by Brooks Tucker, who served as the VA's acting chief of staff in the last year of the Trump administration. The section proposes requiring Veterans Health Administration facilities to increase the number of patients seen each day to equal the number seen by DoD medical facilities. But not everyone, however, agreed with taking that approach, arguing VHA healthcare providers need to spend more time with veterans during their appointments to effectively address their complex health needs. While the Project 2025 guidebook has recently taken the spotlight in the 2024 presidential race, troops and veterans will have to wait until the outcome of the election to determine whether recommendations from the initiative will be carried out.
In this week's military headlines, major defense conferences are often the site of breaking news, and last week it was the Air Force's turn, with the start of the Royal International Air Tattoo in the United Kingdom. Defense News air warfare reporter Stephen Losey was on site at the event and sends in this report about the Air Force's bid to build a new battle management aircraft.
The Air Force has reached an agreement with Boeing to build the first rapid prototype E-7 battle management aircraft, Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall told reporters in England over the weekend. The terms of the contract are not yet settled, but should be wrapped up next month, Kendall said at the Royal International Air Tattoo Air Show. The completion of this deal would resolve months of complicated negotiations between the Air Force and Boeing, stemming from the service's special requirements for its version of the E-7. The Air Force in 2022 chose the E-7 to replace its aging E-3 Sentry Airborne Warning and Control System, or AWACS, fleet. The service plans to buy 26 E-7s from Boeing by 2032, and awarded Boeing a $1.2 billion contract in February 2023 to start working on them. Ultimately, Kendall said, the Air Force wants to have a combination of E-7s and space-based satellites, monitoring battlefields in the airspace above, providing command and control, and targeting enemy forces. Until the E-7 fleet is ready, he said, the service plans to hold on to some AWACS to bridge the gap. Australia already flies the E-7, which it calls the Wedgetail, and Boeing has deals in the works with the UK and other nations. But the Air Force said it needs a modified design for the E-7 to meet U.S. satellite communication, military GPS, and cybersecurity, as well as program protection requirements.
And in more news from the International Air Show, officials announced an update on deliveries of the Joint Strike Fighters from Lockheed Martin after a long delay. Here's Stephen Losey with more.
The U.S. military is once again accepting deliveries of the newest F-35 Joint Strike Fighters from Lockheed Martin after a year-long halt caused by problems with the fighters' upgrades. The first two F-35As, loaded with a truncated or partial version of the Technology Refresh 3 upgrade software, were delivered to the U.S. Air Force on Friday, the F-35 Joint Program Office said. But the lengthy delay in delivering F-35s loaded with TR-3, the fact that they won't be able to fly combat missions until 2025, has had ripple effects on the U.S. Air Force's basing of the jets in Europe, a top general said at the Royal International Air Tattoo Air Show at RAF Fairford in England. The TR-3 upgrades to the F-35 include better displays, computer memory, and processing power. They are necessary to lay the groundwork for a broader F-35 modernization known as Block 4, which will include the ability to carry more weapons, better identify targets, and improve its electronic warfare capabilities. The TR-3 effort has been hampered by software problems, as well as some delays in hardware production. Lockheed Martin was originally supposed to have TR-3 ready around April 2023, but by last July, when the first jets earmarked for TR-3 began rolling off the line in Fort Worth, Texas, the upgrades were still incomplete. The government refused to accept deliveries of these jets, and the backlog of undelivered jets began to grow at Fort Worth. The TR-3 delays were also a factor in the Air Force's decision to dial back its purchase plan for F-35As in the proposed 2025 budget. And TR-3's delay has led to a slowdown in the number of F-35s arriving at RAF Lakenheath, where the Air Force's 2 European-based F-35 squadrons are located. Reporting from RAF Fairford in England, I'm Stephen Losey.
In more news from around the military, a number of military families stationed overseas are scrambling to make new arrangements to ship their dogs back to the United States following new regulations from the CDC. The new rules are aimed at preventing the spread of rabies among dogs, but the updated guidance triggered 8 airlines to halt allowing dogs to travel back to these states with their families from international destinations. Airlines like Lufthansa, based in Germany, said they would no longer be able to fly dogs to the US until further notice. August is the height of PCS season, and families have been struggling to make new arrangements. And instead of maximum effort, troops in some locations will need very little effort to get a look at the new Deadpool and Wolverine movie this week. The Army and Air Force Exchange Service announced that, in a partnership with Disney, it will bring free screenings of the R-rated Marvel movie to troops in Romania and Lithuania. AFES said about 3,000 service members will get to attend the screenings. Deadpool and Wolverine is the latest in the popular MCU series and stars Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. The movie will also play at select AFES Exchange theaters around the world starting July 26th. When we come back, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union returns with items to consider before your child heads out for college. Welcome back. Heading out to college is a time of personal and financial independence. On this edition of Money Minute, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union brings you tips on what choices parents should consider before their child heads to campus.
Congratulations to all you high school grads and parents out there. High school is behind you, and now millions of families are setting their sights on colleges and universities nationwide. This next step brings more independence and financial responsibilities for students, perhaps for the first time. The most important lesson to teach them now is the importance of healthy credit habits and their credit score. Lots of students get a credit card or take out a loan as a result of being solicited by a bank or credit union. They should understand credit is a good thing when used properly and paid back timely. These habits lead to higher credit scores, which lead to lower rates on loans and credit in the future. So use credit when necessary, keep balances low and your credit score high. If your student doesn't already have one, open their own checking account, preferably one that earns interest and has low to no fees. Have them use their bank or credit union's app to keep track of spending and create the habit of always knowing where their money is going. And don't forget about student discounts. One of the perks of being a college kid is the money-saving opportunities some companies and merchants offer to students. Going to college is stressful enough. These lessons can give your student a leg up while they're in school and in life.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more coverage of military and defense topics, program your heads-up display to show you militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the most knowledgeable MP on the base perimeter, sign up for our early bird brief, compiled each morning to bring you the most recent headlines. Lastly, if social media is where you find open source intelligence, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. And until the government drops the hammer on it, we're on TikTok, so go find us there as well. When we come back, an athlete at the 2024 Warrior Games reveals how competition helped her overcome some invisible wounds. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The Warrior Games is a competitive forum for service members with all kinds of illnesses and wounds, both visible and invisible. In this profile from the 2024 Games, One athlete talks about how adaptive sports help her cope with a range of injuries, from physical issues to the trauma of sexual assault, and how competing has helped her find community and healing. Check it out.
I am HM3 retired Gabrielle Varhola, and I served 5 years in the Navy. I injured both my hips running my first PRT in 2019. I was at my very first command, Walter Reed, and I was going a little too hard, I guess, and tore and detached both sides. I was sexually assaulted 2 times in 2019, and one, I did a restricted report for therapy purposes, and the second one I did the full unrestricted report and was able to win my case. I heard about this program from the person that reached out to me at Navy Wounded Warrior, Blake Conley, and he told me about adaptive sports, and I was like, that's right up my alley. I wanna do more and see more and exercise more. I didn't think that I was gonna be able to run after I injured both my hips. Then I started again, and being able to compete has pushed me that much further. I've run 3 medals. One in powerlifting, I got a silver, and then today at track, I've gotten a bronze for the 100 meter and gold for the 200 meter. I've got 2 more races, the female relay and the mixed relay, and I'm super excited. I'm hoping that we medal. We have a great team for Team Navy. Everybody supports each other and loves each other. There is no shortage of cheers and hugs and claps from everybody. This experience has helped in my recovery because it has opened doors for me. I'm a lot more social, I'm a lot more active, and I'm able to travel and go places and show my friends and family what happens after an injury or what happens after having a diagnosis of PTSD. It doesn't stop there, it keeps going. Meeting people that have gone through similar experiences is difficult because it's awful knowing that another person has experienced the same or similar that I have. But at the same time, it's good because we can all come together. We know what works for each person and how to help everybody. We're really just here for one purpose, and that is to recover and cheer everybody on and be happy. The world doesn't stop. There's always happiness at the end of the tunnel, and if you can be a light for somebody that has gone through the same thing, that makes it even better. We just need to support each other and love on each other, because that's what we've got. We've got each other.
Well, that's all we have time for in this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.